The Battle of Gargamella 331 BC. Rapid military deployment, or the capability to move troops and resources quickly and efficiently, is a hallmark of successful military operations. Whether through the mastery of cavalry movements in ancient times or the utilization of modern transport and logistics, the swiftness with which an army can be mobilized can tip the scales of victory. Rapid deployment allows armies to respond to emerging threats, exploit enemy weaknesses, or launch preemptive strikes, all of which can alter the course of history. The element of surprise, which is closely intertwined with rapid deployment, is equally pivotal. Surprise attacks disrupt an opponent's plans, sow confusion, and create psychological shock. And a well-executed surprise can render an enemy unprepared and disorganized, placing them at a severe disadvantage. Throughout history, the audacious and unexpected maneuvers of military leaders have often been the key to achieving victory against numerically superior forces. Consider Alexander the Great's swift and decisive flanking maneuver at the Battle of Gargamella, or Hannibal's brilliant encirclement of the Romans at Cannae. These historic examples underscore how surprise tactics, coupled with rapid deployment, can lead to stunning victories. In modern warfare, the principles remain relevant. The lightning-fast blitzkrieg tactics employed by the German military during World War II demonstrated the enduring importance of rapid movement and the shock of the unexpected. Even in recent conflicts such as the Falklands War in 1981, the advantages of rapid military deployment and surprise tactics are undeniable. The Battle of Gargamella, which was fought in 331 BC, stands as one of the most iconic battles in ancient history, primarily due to Alexander the Great's exceptional military leadership and ingenious flanking maneuver. This pivotal battle took place near the village of Gargamella, which is located in modern-day Iraq, between Alexander's Macedonian army and the Persian forces led by King Darius III. Alexander, known for his audacious tactics and brilliant maneuvering, confronted a vastly larger Persian army. Darius III, the Persian king, deployed his forces on a wide and open plain, believing that the vast numerical advantage of his army would overwhelm the Macedonians. However, Alexander recognized that this terrain offered him the opportunity to exploit the weaknesses of Darius's massive army. Alexander executed a masterful and rapid deployment of his troops. He positioned his elite companion cavalry on the right flank, while the phalanx formation formed the center of his forces. The left wing comprised cavalry and infantry, and as the battle commenced, Alexander personally led the charge on the right, directing his companion cavalry to wheel around and strike at the exposed flank of the Persian line. This audacious flanking maneuver was executed with incredible speed, catching the Persians off guard and causing chaos in their ranks. Darius III was unable to respond effectively to the swift and coordinated attack. The Persian center became entangled with the Macedonian phalanx, while Alexander's cavalry broke through on the right, directly targeting Darius. The result was a decisive victory for Alexander's forces. Darius III fled the battlefield in fear, leaving his army in disarray. The Battle of Gargamella shattered the myth of Persian invincibility and marked a turning point in the struggle between the Greek and Persian worlds. Alexander's rapid deployment, combined with his impressive flanking maneuver, showcased his military genius and highlighted the enduring importance of maneuver warfare and the element of surprise in battle. We'll take a look at pivotal battles and campaigns from different eras of history, showcasing the critical role that rapid military deployment has played in shaping the fates of nations and empires. But before we continue, if you're joining us for the first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button to unlock a treasure trove of incredible videos. And don't keep your thoughts to yourself, drop a comment below and tell us what you'd like us to cover next. The Battle of Cannae, 216 BC. The Battle of Cannae, which was fought in 216 BC during the Second Punic War, stands as one of the most strategically brilliant and tactically devastating battles in ancient history, immortalizing the genius of the Carthaginian general Hannibal. The battle was a masterpiece of military maneuvering, with Hannibal's tactics and rapid deployment leading to a catastrophic defeat for the Roman Republic. At Cannae, Hannibal's forces, mainly composed of Carthaginians and their allied tribes, faced a significantly larger Roman army led by consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Hannibal's strategy revolved around luring the Romans into a seemingly vulnerable position. The key to Hannibal's success was his ability to create a concave formation, with his infantry in a crescent shape facing the Romans. He deployed his less reliable infantry at the center, but had his most elite troops, including the African and Iberian infantry, forming the edges of the crescent. And his cavalry, notably Numidian and Gallic horsemen, were positioned on the wings. As the battle unfolded, Hannibal employed a seemingly reckless strategy of drawing the Romans deeper into his formation, allowing the center to give ground. This created an encirclement effect, with the Carthaginian cavalry on the flanks closing in on the German rear. The Romans then found themselves trapped within Hannibal's tightening grip. The result was a bloodbath. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed or captured. It's estimated that as many as 50,000 Roman soldiers perished at Cannae, making it one of the deadliest battles in history. The defeat was a severe blow to the Roman Republic, but it also demonstrated Hannibal's tactical brilliance and the devastating power of well-executed rapid encirclement tactics. The Battle of Cannae remains a timeless example of military strategy and the significance of maneuver warfare in achieving victory on the battlefield. The Battle of Austerlitz, 1805. The Battle of Austerlitz was fought on December 2nd, 1805, and it stands as one of Napoleon Bonaparte's most brilliant military triumphs, as well as a masterpiece of maneuver warfare. This pivotal battle during the War of the Third Coalition showcased Napoleon's strategic genius and his ability to rapidly deploy and execute decisive surprise attacks. Following the French occupation of Vienna on November 13, 1805, Napoleon relentlessly pursued the retreating Russian and Austrian allied armies into Moravia. At this juncture, the arrival of Russian Emperor Alexander I altered the command dynamics within the Allied forces, limiting the authority of their general Kutuzov. Recognizing the opportunity, Napoleon lured the Allies to confront him west of Austerlitz. And there he set a trap by vacating the Pratzen Plateau, strategically enticing the Allies to occupy it. The pivotal moment arrived when the Allies initiated their main offensive. By deploying 40,000 troops, they sought to sever the French right flank's connection to Vienna. Marshal Louis Davout, commanding a corps of 10,500 soldiers, diligently withstood this onslaught, and simultaneously, the Allied secondary attack on Napoleon's northern flank was met with staunch resistance. Then, Napoleon sprung the trap by ordering Marshal Nicholas Soult to lead 20,000 infantrymen up the Pratzen Plateau slopes. This maneuver effectively shattered the weaker Allied center, allowing Soult's forces to capture and secure the plateau. The Battle of Austerlitz ultimately culminated in a resounding victory for Napoleon. This triumph was an enduring testament to Napoleon's unmatched skills in strategic maneuvering and troop deployment. The Battle of Tannenberg, 1914. The Battle of Tannenberg, a pivotal engagement during World War I, unfolded in August 1914. Under the joint command of General Paul von Hindenburg and General Erich Ludendorff, German forces executed a brilliant and decisive offensive against the Russian Second Army in East Prussia. At the outbreak of World War I, the Russian Second Army, which was commanded by General Alexander Samsonov, ventured into East Prussia with the aim of diverting German forces from the Western Front. The Russians encountered initial success, but soon faced challenges in communication and coordination due to their vast deployment. Recognizing an opportunity, the German High Command dispatched Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff to the Eastern Front. Their strategic vision was to quickly and effectively counter the Russian threat. The Germans meticulously planned their attack, leveraging the extensive railway network in the region to rapidly transport troops and supplies. Meanwhile, they exploited a gap between the Russian First and Second Armies. The battle began on August 26, 1914, with the Germans launching a flanking maneuver against the Russian Second Army. German forces enveloped the Russians, creating a pocket around them. Samsonov's army was then effectively encircled, with their lines of retreat severed. Over the course of several days, the Russians suffered devastating losses, and their Second Army eventually disintegrated. General Samsonov, unable to bear the weight of the defeat, then took his own life. The Battle of Tannenberg was a resounding victory for the Germans. It showcased the effectiveness of their rapid deployment, coordination, and strategic intelligence. The battle was a turning point in the Eastern Front, as it temporarily halted Russian advances into East Prussia and bolstered German morale. General Hindenburg, in particular, emerged as a national hero. The Fall of France, 1940. The blitzkrieg tactics employed by the German military during World War II were a revolutionary form of warfare characterized by rapid and coordinated movements, combined arms strategies, and the element of surprise. And these tactics reached their peak during the invasion of France in 1940, reshaping the nature of modern warfare. In May 1940, as German forces confronted the heavily fortified Maginot Line in northeastern France, they executed a daring maneuver by rapidly advancing through the seemingly impassable Ardennes forest, a region thought to be a natural barrier to large-scale military movements. This bold move, which took the Allies by surprise, was a testament to the flexibility and audacity of blitzkrieg warfare. The German forces, led by General Heinz Guderian, utilized fast-moving armored units, primarily tanks, and mechanized infantry, supported by air cover from the Luftwaffe. This combination of speed, firepower, and coordination allowed them to bypass the heavily defended Maginot Line and push deep into French territory. In turn, this drove a wedge between the British and French armies. The Blitzkrieg had effectively cut off the Allied troops from their supply lines and escape routes. And while the subsequent Dunkirk evacuation was a logistical and moral success for the Allies, the German Blitzkrieg tactics had proven to be devastatingly effective, as demonstrated by the fall of France in just a matter of weeks. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, 1954. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, a defining moment in the First Indochina War, unfolded from March to May 1954. Vietnamese Communist forces, under the astute leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap, executed a meticulously planned and brilliantly executed campaign against the French stronghold of Dien Bien Phu. In a bold move, the French established a fortified outpost in the remote valley of Dien Bien Phu, believing that it would disrupt Viet Minh's supply routes and serve as a strategically advantageous base. Unbeknownst to them, though, General Giap had devised a plan to encircle and besiege this outpost. General Giap's tactics relied heavily on rapid deployment and the element of surprise. His forces skillfully maneuvered through the challenging terrain of the remote region, using guerrilla tactics to remain hidden from the French. They employed a vast network of trenches, tunnels, and fortifications to prepare for the assault. The siege began on March 13, 1954, with the Vietnamese forces gradually closing in on the French stronghold. General Giap's troops launched relentless attacks, gradually weakening the French position. The French, unable to receive adequate reinforcements and supplies due to the Viet Minh's control of the surrounding hills and roads, found themselves isolated and besieged. And despite stubborn French resistance, the situation soon became unreasonable. On May 7, 1954, the French garrison at Dien Bien Phu surrendered, marking a significant turning point in the First Indochina War. This victory for the Viet Minh led to the Geneva Accords later that year, which partitioned Vietnam and paved the way for its eventual reunification. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu exemplified the effectiveness of rapid deployment, surprise tactics, and guerrilla warfare in the face of a technologically superior enemy. General Giap's strategic brilliance and the dedication of his forces underscored the determination of the Vietnamese people in their struggle for independence. The Falklands War, 1982. The Falklands War in 1982 fought between Argentina and the United Kingdom over the disputed Falkland Islands, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, featured remarkable displays of rapid mobilization and deployment by both sides. The conflict began when Argentine forces swiftly occupied the Falkland Islands on April 2, 1982. Argentina's rapid deployment caught the British government off guard, leading to a swift and decisive response. The British government quickly assembled a task force comprising naval vessels, troops, and equipment to retake the islands. One of the most notable examples of rapid mobilization was the British Royal Navy's effort to assemble a powerful naval task force in a matter of weeks. This task force, including the aircraft carriers HMS Hermes and HMS Invincible, along with numerous support vessels, transported British troops and equipment to the South Atlantic. The Royal Marines and the British Army units were rapidly deployed to the Falklands, demonstrating remarkable logistical and strategic planning. The ability to transport troops and supplies over thousands of miles of ocean to a remote and hostile environment was a testament to the UK's military capabilities. On the Argentine side, rapid mobilization was also evident as they fortified their position on the Falklands and South Georgia. They quickly established airfields, deployed troops, and positioned naval assets in the region. Ultimately, though, the conflict resulted in the successful British recapture of the Falklands, demonstrating the importance of rapid mobilization and deployment in modern warfare. The Falklands War showcased the challenges and complexities of conducting military operations in distant and hostile environments, emphasizing the need for effective logistics, intelligence, and strategic planning. Rapid deployment enables armies to seize strategic advantages, respond to threats swiftly, and maintain the initiative on the battlefield. From Alexander the Great's lightning-fast cavalry to modern airlift capabilities, the ability to move troops quickly has been and continues to be a hallmark of successful military campaigns. Efficient logistics underpin the sustainability of military operations. Supplies, equipment, and reinforcements are the lifeblood of any army, and well-organized logistics ensure that these vital elements reach the front lines in a timely manner. From ancient empires like Rome to modern multinational coalitions, logistical prowess has often been the key to victory. The element of surprise, whether achieved through ingenious tactics, unexpected maneuvers, or covert operations, frequently tips the balance in favor of the unanticipated attacker. Battles like the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC demonstrated how surprise can lead to catastrophic defeats or triumphant victories. In an age of technological innovation, these timeless principles highlight that despite advances in weaponry and communication, the fundamentals of military success remain anchored in the ability to move swiftly, sustain operations, and outthink the adversary.
Chernobyl. The worst nuclear accident in Earth's history took place on April 26, 1986. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was located in what once was the Soviet Union and is now referred to as Pripyat, Ukraine. This horrible disaster all started during what was supposed to be a simple test. The test was to check and see how long turbines in the reactor would spin and provide power to the nuclear plant's main circulating pumps after a surprise event like a blackout. During the test, a reactor suddenly became unstable and there was an explosion. A second explosion went off not long after, and 2 workers at the plant were instantly killed. This disaster is seen as the largest uncontrolled radioactive release in history. Radioactive substances were sent into the atmosphere for 10 days straight. Thousands of people were exposed to radiation, resulting in the direct deaths of 28 people. Hundreds of thousands of others had to be evacuated out of their homes and moved out of the exclusion zone. So, what exactly happened? A flawed reactor design paired with inadequately trained staff led to the disaster. The reactors didn't have a sturdy enough containment structure. That is a concrete and steel dome to cover the reactor. It is designed with the purpose of keeping radiation inside the plant in case of an emergency. Over 500,000 people helped with the cleanup of Chernobyl. One of their duties was building the sarcophagus, which entombs the reactor that originally exploded. It was constructed to contain the leftover radioactive material. The city of Pripyat was quickly abandoned after the accident. There were about 50,000 people living there before they were forced to literally pack their belongings and leave town forever. What they couldn't take with them was left behind. The city was complete with schools, hospitals, and even an amusement park. To this day, Pripyat remains a ghost town and an eerie time capsule to 1986, plagued by radioactive tragedy. The city is not completely abandoned, though. There are still a few people who work to clean up the radioactive areas. They live in a small base nearby. Wildlife is still in the region as well, and people have noticed that their population has risen since the area has been evacuated by humans. Tourists are actually allowed to visit the area, but it requires a special pass. The tour even ends with a radiation test. The Elan School. Outside of Lewiston, Maine, lies the abandoned grounds of the Elan School. This was once a school for troubled teens, and it was open from 1970 up until 2011. What was viewed as a last resort for helping young men and women get their lives back on track was, in reality, nothing more than an abusive center that did much more harm than it did good. Elan was established as a place for those with drug addiction to go for treatment. As the school established itself further, it became a center for troubled youths. The founders of Elan decided to use tough love to turn teens around. Tuition for this intensive program was upwards of $50,000 per student. Those enrolled in the program were said to be berated, not just by counselors, but by fellow students. It was not that unusual for students to wear signs or costumes that were completely humiliating as punishment. It was even reported that the Elan students were forced to compete in boxing matches with each other. These fights were approved by those in charge of the program. There was one student who died after one of these matches, and he was just 15 years old. Some who attended and graduated from Elan left with a new take on life. They were grateful for what they went through. Others have told a different story about the emotional, physical, and mental abuse they endured during the program. Those who had a negative experience described Elan as a prison or a dictatorship. Their lives were monitored constantly, 24/7, and the slightest infraction would lead to punishment. Students who simply smiled without permission could be in trouble with the staff, and their consequence would be a grueling bathroom cleaning duty. Phone calls and letters home were also heavily monitored. From the 1970s until the time the facility closed its doors in 2011, the Elan School was shrouded in controversy. In 2011, the owners blamed the internet as the reason they were closing down. Students that attended the school shared their stories online until they eventually gained traction. Also, multiple reports about the school were discussed by the press. The buildings for Elan still stand to this day, and people have done urban exploring inside and shared their findings on social media. We know of some of the troubles that happened at the Elan, but we may never know all of the horrors that were experienced at the school's grounds. Have you visited any creepy, abandoned places? Let us know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. In Ovid, New York, you can find the abandoned buildings of the Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. They're located along Seneca Lake, south of Lake Ontario. Sylvester D. Willard, the Surgeon General for New York, helped establish this asylum during the 1860s. It was meant to be a more humane place for those with mental illness because most shelters during that age had extremely poor conditions. Willard opened in 1869 and welcomed both male and female patients. There were a series of buildings on the campus. Some of its patients were violent, but were allowed to walk around the grounds freely. Sadly, Willard served as a dumping ground for those suffering from all forms of mental illness. More buildings were later built to accommodate the growing number of patients, and soon enough, the campus covered over 900 acres of land. During the 1870s, there were 1,550 patients, and it was the largest asylum in the U.S. They claimed to offer a moral treatment for their patients. Included at Willard was a movie theater and a gymnasium, but there were also some hospital buildings used for electroshock therapy. The campus had a morgue as well, plus a cemetery full of graves marked with numbers, not the names of those who died. By 1890, Willard was an official state hospital. Finding help became an issue in the 1910s thanks to World War I. Also, Willard was overcrowded at the time. By the time the 1920s rolled around, there were claims of mistreatment of patients, and one even resulted in a death. Tuberculosis was another huge issue, and it took the lives of many patients. By the 1970s, countless asylums were closing in the United States. Reports of mistreatment of patients around the country were reported. Also, many asylums were lacking the proper funding. What happened behind the walls of places like Willard may never be fully known, but the remains of the asylum have been uploaded online through images to offer a glimpse into the past. The pictures show various forms of equipment and different rooms left untouched. St. George's Church. If you go 124 miles east of Prague in the Czech Republic, you'll find the tiny village of Lukova. St. George's Church, first built in 1352, was an important church and the pillar of the community for centuries up until 1968 when it had to close. Sadly, the roof collapsed during a funeral. Peter Kukel, a local resident, decided to campaign and raise money to repair the church in 2012, so he asked a local art student named Jacob Hadrava for help. Hadrava was brought in to help come up with something to get the money for the church restoration. Hadrava came up with an ingenious plan to add something special to the church. He created plaster statues of people, but he designed them with sheets over them and placed them in the pews of the abandoned St. George's Church. The addition of the ghost gave the abandoned church a very creepy feel. The site had become a popular tourist attraction, and they have raised over $25,000 for repairs. The church is open to guests, and they've had many public masses at the church along with other events. Kolmanskop. This abandoned town in Namibia's desert is not just creepy, it's absolutely shocking. In 1908, diamonds were discovered there by a local man. Namibia was under the control of Germany at the time, and it was the Germans who mined the area. Prospectors flooded the region not long after, and Kolmanskop was a boom town. Diamonds made a few people rich, and for a while, 12% of the yearly diamond production came from this town. Kolmanskop had homes, a school, a hospital, and even a power station. There was also a recreation center that hosted many musical events for the community. Water had to be brought into town from the outside. Sandstorms were also a constant problem. The wealthy residents built their homes on a higher elevation that offered better protection from the storms. Nothing lasts forever, though. Kolmanskop was pretty much finished by the end of the 1920s. People left when diamonds were found in another area. There was still mining taking place until the town was fully abandoned around 1956. Today, the town is completely empty, and there's a tourist destination for those interested in ghost towns. But this town has a little something extra. Since the community has been abandoned, it has been overtaken by the desert. Many of the abandoned homes and shops are filled with dunes of sand. Sanzhi houses. An ambitious, futuristic housing project in Taiwan was a major disaster. In 1978, the Sanzhi houses were introduced to the public. These futuristic homes looked like UFOs. The company that built them hoped wealthy Taiwanese citizens or American soldiers stationed overseas would buy the homes. The properties had very futuristic designs and were equipped with modern conveniences. But rumors circulated around the island of Taiwan that the project was built on a haunted burial ground. There were a number of car accidents that took place near the construction site, And this fueled the rumor that the houses were built somewhere with major bad luck. Within 2 years of the homes being built, all hopes for profit were lost. The Sanzhi houses sat empty for almost 9 years. A new investor came in to resurrect the project, but soon discovered that the homes were not up to code. Taiwan is susceptible to earthquakes, and these homes were not designed properly to withstand these natural disasters. The area turned into a destination for those interested in creepy abandoned places. The homes were later demolished around 2008, since plans were set to build a water park on the site. House of Judah. Somewhere in Allegan County, Michigan, lies the remains of the House of Judah. Buildings painted blue and white are falling apart and serve as reminders of what happened there during the late 1970s and early 1980s. People moved here to be part of something called the House of Judah. This was a religious sect controlled by a man named William A. Lewis. He was a self-proclaimed prophet from Chicago that established a religious commune in Allegan County. Lewis started with a small group of followers, but it slowly grew to just under 100 people. The House of Judah lived in complete secrecy. A closer look reveals a cult, and they experienced the worst of the worst. Cult members were forced to work long hours, raising animals and keeping the commune clean. They grew their own crops, but the people there barely had anything to eat. In July 1983, a 12-year-old child named John Yarbo was dropped off at a local hospital. He later passed away, but authorities were called in about Yarbo's condition since he'd been beaten to death. Yarbo was a victim of the rigid and unforgiving rules set forth by Lewis at the House of Judah. Yarbo was supposed to be doing chores, but was caught watching television instead. His punishment was being beaten with a punishment stick known as Big Mac. Lewis developed a religious commune that was ruled by fear and ruthless punishments. Some of the punishments were public and were cruel. Others were absolutely horrific. When law enforcement entered the commune, they found beyond deplorable conditions. It was reported that the people were practically living in slavery. Lewis and some of his top advisors were tried and convicted of various crimes. Members of the House of Judah relocated to Alabama to start over. The remains of the commune are now hidden under the brush of Allegan County to this very day. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Amusement parks have a very nostalgic quality to them. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in Rock, West Virginia is abandoned and has an incredibly dark past that attracts tourists from around the country. The land for Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was purchased in the 1920s by a man named Conley Snidow. He had big plans for this park. He installed swings, a water slide, places to swim and canoe. He even added a dance hall. It was meant to be a fun destination for the locals. But Snidow didn't do his homework on the property. It was said to have been owned by the Clay family during the late 18th century. They owned Lake Shawnee and had around 800 acres of land to themselves. When the patriarch of the family was out to hunt, an indigenous tribe took 3 of his sons. One of them died from a very gruesome death. The patriarch was forced to avenge their deaths. After learning of it, Snidow wasn't swayed by the history, but Lake Shawnee would have more incidents tied to its very dark history. From the 1920s until the late 1960s, 6 people died at the amusement park. The 950 JDJ. The 950 JDJ is the most powerful rifle in the world. It was developed by SSK Industries and J.D. Jones, which is where the rifle cartridge gets its name. It's capable of propelling a 2,400 grain bullet at 2,100 feet per second. The diameter of its bullets is .950 inches, and its case length is 2.75 inches. Most bullets also end up around the 3,600 grain mark to add to the power, with each one being custom-made and costing up to $40 each. But who would want such a powerful rifle like the 950 JDJ? The rifle was created as a custom order from a client who wanted an extremely powerful weapon capable of shooting cast bullets. Surprisingly, although it is a novelty creation, the company behind the rifle and its ammunition actually managed to get it deregulated under a sporting use exception, even though the bullets are almost double the size of .50 caliber rounds. This means that it has the same certification as any other Title I rifle and can be used by any American citizen who fits the requirements over the age of 18. That doesn't mean that anyone should fire one though, as the massive power possessed by the 950 JDJ is mirrored in its mighty recoil. And as a result, those who use it need to take various precautions, including scopes, bipods, and other support and peripherals that can handle the intense load. Despite getting it deregulated, the 950 JDJ was never meant for mass production. In fact, only 3 rifles were ever made, and SKS stopped making the ammunition for them in 2014. If you want to buy one of the 3 rifles, just know that they cost a pretty penny. At the time of construction, the rifles were reportedly worth $8,000. But when the very first rifle to be made, nicknamed Fat Mac, hit the auction, it fetched $12,650. The punt gun. There is one gun that was so deadly that it was banned from being used in 1860 in most states. The good news is that it is only dangerous if you're a duck. Ducks were incredibly popular in the early 19th century, being needed both for their meat and their feathers, which were used in things such as soft furnishings and even women's hats. Demand was so great that hunters tried to find a way to be able to kill multiple ducks at once, rather than one at a time with regular hunting firearms. This is where the punt gun comes in. Measuring in at over 8 feet long, the gun required at least 2 people to hold it on land. It was powerful though, capable of using over a pound of ammunition with each shot to kill up to 100 ducks and other waterfowl in just one single shot. However, the punt gun was so large and so powerful that using it would be a problem. Special punt boats were developed just to support the gun's weight, as well as one hunter to operate it. The water would also help with the recoil of the gun, just propelling the punt back several feet rather than knocking 1 or 2 men potentially off their feet. Hunters became incredibly efficient at using the punt gun. Working together in groups of up to 10 people, they would all go out onto the water and encircle the flocks of ducks, coordinating their shots so that they all fired at the same time for maximum impact. But this method ended up being too effective. Hunters could easily kill 500 ducks in this way. A hunter named Ray Todd claimed that he and 3 other men were able to kill over 1,000 ducks in one night, with the entire flock being around a half-mile long in mass. And there's records to prove it. It didn't take long for the duck and waterfowl population in general in the US to be completely decimated by this hunting practice. So much so that laws were put into place to limit the transport of game at first, before a full ban on the use of punt guns and market hunting came into force in 1918. Today, there are still around 100 punt guns left over, although it is illegal to fire them in the States. In the UK, though, they still see use, although not for hunting. Instead, thanks to the sheer power of the guns, they make for quite a spectacle, which caused Queen Victoria to ask for a punt gun salute to celebrate her Diamond Jubilee back in 1897. This was then mirrored in 2012, when for her Diamond Jubilee, Queen Elizabeth II was also given a 21 punt gun salute. Have you ever heard of the punt gun or seen one in person? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 3, Project Babylon. It's not often that a country is able to make a supergun. However, one country that came close was Iraq, with the construction of Big Babylon. In 1981, Iraq was at war with Iran, and it needed firepower to help in its offensive. The then Defense Secretary for the country was Saddam Hussein, who contacted known arms dealer and gunsmith Gerald Bull to create artillery weapons for them. Bull accepted, and his designs were critical in the country's victory over its neighbor. One of the main draws about getting Bull on his side was the fact that he had been part of the HARP, High Altitude Research Project, carried out by the US and Canadian governments during the 1960s. Even though the project was scrapped in 1967, thanks to the advent of the Vietnam War, Bull still kept a passion for space-related machines and weaponry. That's why, when in 1988 Iraq paid him $25 million to begin Project Babylon for them to create the very first space gun, Bull really couldn't refuse. The project involved creating 3 different superguns, 2 full-sized 1,000mm caliber guns named Big Babylon, and a smaller prototype that was only 350mm, Baby Babylon. The plan was to mount Big Babylon on a hillside, as the barrel would need to be over 511 feet with a 3-foot bore and would weigh 1,510 tons, making it far too big and too heavy to transport anywhere. It would be the largest supergun ever built, dwarfing any other previous project attempts, such as those constructed and planned by the German forces during World War II. The potential for Big Babylon was huge. Not only was it able to fire 1,322-pound rounds over 621 miles, meaning that Iraq could easily fire at Iran and its capital Kuwait from well within their own borders, but the supergun could also launch a 440-pound satellite into orbit. Although the capability to do this was there, the problem was getting the charge of the weapon right, as it would need a sustained release thanks to the sheer length of its barrel. The recoil of the gun would also have been over 27,000 tons. That's a force equivalent to a nuclear bomb. It would create an earthquake whose tremors would be felt and registered across the world. Had these problems been worked out, the cost of launching satellites into orbit could have been drastically reduced. Big Babylon could launch a satellite at a cost of $1,727 per kilogram inflated to current rates, while the current costs today from NASA stand at around $22,000 per kilogram. In May 1989, the prototype supergun Baby Babylon was ready. The 135-foot-long gun was mounted on a hillside to begin testing and would be capable of a range of 466 miles. However, Project Babylon would soon come to an abrupt end. On March 22, 1990, as Gerald Bull entered his apartment in Brussels, he was shot twice in the head and 3 times in the back. The gun was silenced, and there was no one around to see what happened, so no one knows who Bull's killer was, or perhaps who they worked for. There were many theories as to who may have been behind this assassination. The prevailing theory is that it was Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, not because of the supergun, but the other work Bull was doing to increase and improve Iraq's ballistic missile program. However, there were also plenty of other nations and agencies that may have wanted Bull dead, including the US, the UK, South Africa, and even Iraq itself. After his death, all work on Project Babylon stopped, so we have no idea what these superguns would truly have been capable of. The fact remains, though, that had the project been completed, it would have been quite literally earth-shaking. Schwerer Gustav. The Schwerer Gustav, conceived in the 1930s by Germany, emerged as the largest cannon of World War II. It was designed in response to the formidable Maginot Line, an extensive defensive barrier that stretched along the border between France and Germany, fortified and closely guarded. With the intent of invading France in their minds, Hitler's Nazi government reached out to Gustav Krupp, a leading figure in weapon and steel manufacturer in Germany. The specification given to Krupp was that the weapon should be able to destroy a 1-meter thick layer of steel or up to 7 meters of reinforced concrete. In 1937, Krupp was ready to show his designs, which were received by Hitler himself. Pleased with the concept, Hitler provided Krupp with 10 million marks and asked him to make sure that the construction was complete by spring of 1940, when they would finally attack the Maginot Line. Unfortunately, the construction of the Schwerer Gustav took a lot longer than was anticipated. The main issue was in the construction of the barrel, which had to be made to specification and be able to handle the immense power and speed of the projectiles used. Thankfully, though, the gun was not needed for the assault on the Maginot Line, and the German army got through the French defenses with just their current power alone. At the end of 1940, Schwerer Gustav was finally complete, and in early 1931, a test firing of the weapon took place at the Rügenwald Range on the Baltic coast, an event that was watched by Hitler himself. The weapon was immense and far bigger than any other railway gun that had ever been constructed up to this point. The 1,350-ton machine was 141 feet long, and so unlike other railway guns that could operate from a single carriage, Schwerer Gustav had to be transported in pieces and assembled on site. This was no quick endeavor either, which was found out when Schwerer Gustav was given its first deployment in the war when it was used in the siege of Sevastopol in 1942. It took a team of 1,420 men around 3 weeks to put it all together once it arrived. However, the reward seemed to be well worth it. Schwerer Gustav bombarded the city of Sevastopol across a 47-kilometer range, firing down highly explosive shells that weighed 4.7 tons. The force behind the shells delivered by Schwerer Gustav were so great that one of its 7-ton concrete-piercing shells managed to penetrate 100 feet into the ground before it detonated and took out an underground ammunition store. Although only 50 shells were fired, this was far more than enough to bring Sevastopol to its knees. Despite taking so long to build and so much effort being put into its construction, Schwerer Gustav's time on the battlefield during World War II was incredibly short-lived. It's recorded as having also been used in 1944 in firing shells into Warsaw, but accounts on this vary, so it's never been confirmed that it was used at all. Aside from this mention, Schwerer Gustav just seemed to disappear. It's heavily believed that it was destroyed by German troops in April of 1945 to stop it from falling into the hands of the enemy troops. To support this, pieces from Schwerer Gustav were found on April 22nd, after which point the remains were taken by Soviet engineers. After this point, the massive supergun was never heard of again. Pfeifer-Zeliska 600 Nitro Express. The Pfeifer-Zeliska 600 Nitro Express is the most powerful handgun in the world. A handgun is so strong because of the bullets it's designed to carry. The 600 bullets were originally crafted in 1899 and used in the hunting of the largest beasts on land, African elephants. Thankfully, the killing of these majestic beasts has been outlawed, but it didn't stop arms manufacturer Pfeifer from being able to think up a new use for them when they were commissioned by Swiss man Mr. Zeliska to build a one-off weapon. The 600 Nitro Express Magnum revolver, designed in the style of the Old West, is a single-action firearm with a 5-round capacity. Its superior construction strength compared to a double-action revolver stems from the robust base frame supporting the cylinder. Although it has been built to be as sturdy as possible, the 600 Pfeifer-Zeliska still needs a lot of support when firing thanks to the sheer amount of recoil generated by its powerful ammunition. It's not that the recoil will blow you away, although it does pack a punch, but more the sheer weight of the pistol itself at 13 pounds, which is used to counterbalance this force. As a result, most people who fire it will do so on a bench clamp or resting it on sandbags that can help to support it. When it comes to the destructive power of the Pfeifer-Zeliska 600 Nitro Express, it does not disappoint. It's able to easily pierce through 10 millimeters of steel plate from 36 feet away as if it were nothing. If you want one for your own though, you'll have to be prepared to spend a pretty penny. Pfeifer will make one of these on a custom order, but it will set you back around $20,000. And if the Pfeifer-Zeliska 600 seems too powerful for you, they do make one that is chambered for the .458 Winchester Magnum instead, which is the second most powerful handgun in the world. Thanks for watching. Which one of these powerful firearms impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed our video today. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.